Rain pelted the cracked windshield of the old Chevy as Asher Cole wrestled with the steering wheel, trying to park without waking his sleeping 5-year-old in the backseat. "Daddy, are we here?" a small voice mumbled. "Just for a minute, buddy," Asher said, turning to smile at his son through the rearview mirror. "I'll be right back. Stay buckled, okay?" Zane nodded sleepily, his dinosaur hoodie bunched around his neck. Asher grabbed the umbrella from the floorboard, stepped out into the downpour, and jogged toward the glass doors of the grocery store. He wasn't here to shop. Just to drop off an application, his third this week. Single dad life wasn't easy, especially when every employer saw a man with a kid and a patchy resume and immediately assumed he'd be unreliable. But Zane came first. Always. As he stepped into the lobby, he noticed a woman near the entrance, long legs, black blazer clinging to her from the rain, standing too still. Her face was pale, lips parted slightly like she was trying to speak. Then she collapsed. "Hey, whoa!" Asher lunged forward, catching her just before she hit the floor. "Ma'am, hey, can you hear me?" People around them started murmuring, but no one moved. Asher cradled her gently, checking her pulse. "Someone call an ambulance," he said, loud and clear. She fainted. He brushed a soaked lock of hair from her face. She looked expensive. Her heels were designer. Her watch probably cost more than his rent. But right now, she just looked fragile. She blinked, eyes unfocusing. "Where?" "You fainted," Asher said. "You're okay, don't move." Her voice was hoarse. I'm fine, no ambulance. You sure? You scared the hell out of me." A faint, tired laugh left her lips. "You caught me, that's something." Asher helped her sit up slowly, careful not to startle her. She winced but nodded. "I'll get you some water," he said, running to the customer service desk and returning with a bottle. She drank it slowly. "I didn't eat all day," she admitted, cheeks flushing. "Too many meetings." "Been there," Asher said. "Except my meetings usually involve spilled juice and dinosaurs." She looked at him, really looked. Her eyes were a deep brown, sharp and intelligent despite her fragile state. "You're a dad." "Yeah, Zane's 5, he said, glancing toward the car. "He's in the parking lot." "Sleeping?" She tilted her head. "You left your kid alone," Asher raised a brow. "He's locked in, car's off, I'm 5 feet away, and I just caught a woman from face planting into a tile floor. I'm doing my best." Her lips twitched. "Fair enough." He held out a hand. "I'm Asher." She hesitated. Rachel Prescott." He didn't recognize the name, aside from the vague sense that it sounded like the kind of name with a building named after it. "You sure you're okay?" he asked again. "I'll survive," she said, then stood too fast and stumbled. Without thinking, he caught her again. "You're not driving anywhere," he said flatly. She narrowed her eyes. "I'm not helpless." "I never said you were, but your legs are saying something different." Something flickered in her expression, like she wasn't used to being spoken to that way. "I'll give you a ride," he said, "after I check on my son." Rachel followed him outside, her heels clicking against the pavement. When Zane spotted Asher through the window, he smiled, then noticed Rachel. "Daddy." "Who's that lady?" "This is Rachel," Asher said. "She needed help." Zane blinked. Then, in the honest way only kids can be, he said, "She looks like a princess." Rachel laughed, genuinely this time. "That's the nicest thing anyone's said to me all week." "Want to sit in the front?" Asher asked her. "You look like you could use a break." She hesitated again, then nodded. As they drove, he noticed her watching the dashboard, the cracked leather seats, the taped-up glove box. "You really a single dad?" she asked softly. "Zane's mom left when he was 2. I've been figuring it out ever since." She didn't respond right away. "I used to think I was too busy for kids," she said finally. "Now I wonder if I missed something." "You did," Zane piped up from the backseat. "Kids are awesome." Rachel turned and smiled at him. "You might be right." When they pulled up to a building downtown, Asher's jaw dropped. "You live here, for now," she said, unbuckling her seatbelt. "Thank you, Asher, for everything." He scratched the back of his neck. "Hey, if you ever need dinner," she said suddenly. "What? You and Zane come to dinner." "I owe you. You don't owe me anything." "I want to," she said, her voice suddenly softer. "Please," he hesitated. "All right, just don't expect us to show up in tuxedos." She smiled. "Casual's fine, I'll text you the details." "I don't have a phone right now," he admitted. "Mine broke last week." "Can I pick a time?" She blinked, then wrote something in perfect penmanship on the back of a receipt from her purse. Come tomorrow, she said, handing it to him. 7. The doorman knows me. As she got out of the car, she paused, then turned back. Zane's right, she said softly. You really are a hero. And then she was gone, heels tapping into the glass building like she belonged to another world entirely. Asher looked at the address. Daddy, Zane said, are we going to the princess's castle tomorrow? Asher laughed under his breath. Yeah, buddy. Looks like we are. The elevator doors opened onto the top floor of a building so sleek it looked like it belonged in a movie. Asher stepped out cautiously, holding Zane's hand tightly as they walked into a hallway lined with dark wood and gold fixtures. There was no buzzing to announce their arrival, just a man in a suit standing beside a double door who gave Asher a polite nod. You're expected, the man said, opening the door. Asher blinked. The penthouse beyond was a cathedral of glass and steel, its walls floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the entire city skyline, now glowing orange from the setting sun. Inside, everything gleamed: marble floors, minimalist furniture, and a chandelier that looked like it cost more than any car Asher had ever owned. Zane tugged his sleeve. Is this real? Feels like a dream, huh? Asher whispered. From deeper inside, Rachel's voice called out. Come in, you're right on time. She appeared a moment later, barefoot and wearing a soft blue blouse and relaxed slacks, her hair up in a loose knot. It was the first time Asher saw her without the armor of business attire. She looked approachable. Zane's eyes lit up. Hi, Princess, Rachel laughed. Hi, Zane, I've been waiting for you. You said there'd be mac and cheese, he said seriously. I made 2 kinds, she replied, crouching to his level. One with truffle and one without. You get to pick. Asher raised a brow. You cook, I had help, she admitted. But I stirred. She led them to a dining room with a long glass table already set. Zane was seated at the head with a smaller place setting prepared just for him. Asher sat across from Rachel. So. This is cozy, he said, glancing around at the space that looked like it belonged in a design magazine. I know it's a bit much, she said, but I wanted you both to feel welcome. You didn't have to go all out. I didn't, she said, pouring water into his glass. This is me dialing it down. Asher leaned back, watching her carefully. You're different tonight. She met his eyes. So are you. Dinner went surprisingly smooth. Zane devoured 2 servings before Rachel led him to a playroom she said her assistant had set up with toys delivered that morning. Asher watched as his son ran toward a stack of blocks taller than him, then turned back to Rachel, who was clearing the dishes with practiced ease. So, he said, crossing his arms, you going to tell me what you actually do, Rachel Prescott? She didn't flinch. I was wondering when you'd ask. I figured I'd let you eat first, he said, but I'm guessing you're more than a woman who faints in grocery stores. She set the last plate down and turned to face him fully. I'm the CEO of Prescott and Vale. We specialize in tech-based logistics and infrastructure management. He whistled low. That's a mouthful. It pays the bills, she said with a shrug. And this place, company provided, I'm only here during transitions between board expansions. I move around a lot. Asher nodded slowly. So that's why you looked like you hadn't eaten all day. You're running an empire. She leaned against the counter, folding her arms. And you're raising one. He tilted his head. You're not the person I expected to open that door tonight. Rachel walked closer. Neither were you. There was a pause between them, thick with something unsaid. You know, he said finally, I almost didn't come. Why not? Because I didn't want to feel like a charity case. She stepped closer. I didn't invite you out of pity. I invited you because I wanted to see you again. His voice was quieter now. Why? Rachel hesitated, then answered honestly. Because when I collapsed, you didn't ask who I was. You didn't back off when I barked at you. You caught me. And not just physically. Asher frowned slightly, unsure how to respond to that. Rachel continued, I've been in rooms with global leaders and never felt as safe as I did when you looked me in the eye and said, you're not driving anywhere. He stared at her, something shifting behind his gaze. I don't know what you're looking for, Rachel, but I'm not polished. I'm not connected. I'm a guy who's trying to keep the lights on and get his kid to school on time. She stepped even closer, almost within reach. And that's exactly what makes you different. Before he could reply, Zane came barreling in with a toy helicopter. Daddy, They have the remote kind. Rachel laughed and bent to examine it with him. Asher watched her, trying to reconcile the woman kneeling on the floor with a toy with the one who ran a company worth more than most people would ever see in their lives. When Zane was finally coaxed into a guest room to watch a cartoon, Rachel returned to the living room where Asher stood near the window, watching the city. He didn't turn around when he said, "You don't strike me as someone who gets close to people easily." "I don't," Rachel admitted. "And yet here we are," she joined him at the glass. "You're not like the people I usually meet. I'll take that as a compliment." "It is," she said. "I've spent my life with people who see opportunities, not people." He glanced sideways at her. "And what do you see?" She looked up at him, her expression open in a way it hadn't been before. "Possibility." The silence stretched between them, thick with meaning, but then Rachel's phone rang from somewhere in the kitchen, sharp and insistent. She didn't move to answer it. "You can get that," he said. "I don't want to. It could be important." "It's always important," she said, finally stepping away, "but some things matter more." As she disappeared into the kitchen, Asher exhaled slowly, his hand brushing the window pane. He didn't know where this was going, but one thing was certain: he'd stepped into a world that wasn't his. And somehow, against all odds, it was starting to feel like he belonged. The next morning, Asher stood outside the community center's back entrance, shifting his weight as Zane chased a paper airplane along the cracked pavement. The sun hadn't cleared the skyline yet, but Asher had been up for hours. After last night, sleep had been a lost cause. He hadn't planned to bring Zane here again so soon, but Rachel had called in a favor her words and arranged for Zane to join a private activity group run by one of her foundation's outreach programs. Zane would be safe, supervised, and thrilled. Asher, on the other hand, couldn't shake the feeling that he was standing on a cliff edge with no idea what waited below. "Mr. Cole," a woman in a polo shirt called out from the doorway. "Yeah, that's us." She greeted them both warmly, handed Zane a name tag, and led him inside without hesitation. Asher watched him go with a mix of pride and unease. It was rare for Zane to be out of his reach, but he needed this. They both did. Across the street, a sleek black SUV idled at the curb. The passenger window lowered and Rachel leaned toward it. "Get in," she said. Asher hesitated. "Where are we going? You'll see." Inside, the vehicle felt like stepping into a different temperature of air, quiet, clean, and still. Asher ran his palms down his jeans, suddenly aware of every worn thread. "You didn't have to send a car," he said. "I didn't," Rachel replied. "I'm driving you myself," he glanced over. "You drive when I want to think," she said, "and right now I need perspective." The SUV pulled away, merging into the early morning traffic. The silence stretched between them, thick with anticipation. "Tell me something real," Rachel said abruptly. "About what? Anything. No filters," he exhaled slowly. "I hate asking for help, even when I need it." "Why?" "Because every time I did in the past, the answer was no. Eventually, you stop asking." Rachel nodded, her gaze locked on the road. "I used to think relying on people made me weak. Then I realized I was surrounding myself with people I couldn't rely on. There's a difference." "Is that what this is?" he asked. "You testing me?" "No," she said. "This is me trying to understand why someone like you walked into my life when I least expected it." The car curved through the city until it reached a gated property on the edge of the waterfront. A man in uniform waved them through without question. "I thought you said you were in town temporarily," Asher said, looking out at the sprawling modern structure beyond the gates. "I am, but this place isn't mine." The SUV pulled into a circular driveway, stopping beneath a covered arch. Rachel stepped out, motioning for him to follow. Inside, the house was quiet. Sleek lines, tall windows, and a view of the water that looked like it belonged in a travel magazine. But it wasn't the luxury that caught Asher's attention, it was the framed photographs along the hallway. A younger Rachel. A man with silver-streaked hair. A woman in a red coat. "Your family?" he asked. "They were," she said. "My father passed last year. This was his." Asher looked at her. "Why bring me here?" Rachel walked ahead, stopping in front of a glass display case. Inside it sat a chessboard with worn edges and a small plaque beneath it. "Every move must matter." "He taught me everything I know about precision, strategy, control," she said. But he forgot to teach me how to lose, or how to trust someone else to make a move. Asher stepped closer. Is that what you're trying to do now? She turned to face him. I don't want to be alone anymore, and I don't want to keep pretending I'm not drawn to someone just because he doesn't fit into a world I didn't even choose. He held her gaze. You don't know everything about me. I know enough, she said. I know you show up when it matters. I know you protect what's yours, and I know you make me feel like I can breathe when everything else is noise. Asher swallowed hard. You're asking a lot. I'm not asking for anything, she said, just telling you where I stand. Their eyes locked, tension swirling in the quiet space between them. It wasn't just attraction anymore, it was something deeper, scarier. Then Rachel's phone buzzed on the counter. She ignored it. You're allowed to answer it, Asher said. You don't have to prove anything. I'm not proving anything, she said. I'm choosing. He stepped forward, close enough to see the shift in her breathing. And what if I can't give you the kind of life you're used to? I don't want the life I'm used to, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I want something real, something that doesn't come with stock options and press releases. Asher leaned in slightly, searching her expression. You sure about that? I've never been more sure of anything. Before either of them could speak again, the back door opened and a man in a tan suit entered, pausing at the sight of them. Rachel, he said, voice clipped. We need to talk now. She stiffened. Not now, Daniel. Asher stepped back instinctively, but Rachel held her ground. This is important, Daniel pressed. The board is calling an emergency vote. They want a statement about last night. She crossed her arms. What about last night? You were seen. With him, he said, shooting Asher a look. It's already on the gossip sites. Rachel's jaw tightened. I don't care. You need to, Daniel said. Our stock dipped this morning. Investors are nervous. I'm not issuing a statement about my personal life. You don't have a personal life, Rachel, Daniel said. You are the company. No, she said, stepping closer. I built the company. That doesn't mean I have to give it my soul. Daniel glanced at Asher again. And him. What exactly is he to you? Asher didn't flinch. I'm the one who caught her when she fell. Rachel's voice was steady. And he's the one who stayed. Daniel looked between them, clearly displeased. We'll talk later. As he stormed out, Rachel exhaled slowly. That's the man who thinks he owns my choices. Asher raised an eyebrow. Does he? Not anymore, she said. He studied her. You're risking a lot. She looked at him, eyes clear. So are you. And in that moment, neither of them moved, because something had shifted, something irreversible. Not in words, not in promises, but in the simple fact that neither of them walked away. The wind whipped off the bay as Asher stepped out of the SUV, the air sharp with salt and late spring chill. He adjusted Zane's jacket, zipping it up to his chin before lifting him out of the car. Rachel stood by the edge of the private dock, her hair gathered in a twist, a wool coat wrapped tightly around her. The motor yacht behind her gleamed white and silver, bobbing gently against the tide. A steward in navy stood near the gangway, waiting with quiet professionalism. Zane ran up to her first. Is this a ship or a mansion? Rachel crouched, tucking a stray curl behind his ear. Both. It's called the Ira, named after a snow goddess. Asher followed more slowly. You sure this isn't too much? Rachel looked up at him, her eyes unreadable. I've lived my whole life surrounded by too much, but I've never had anything that felt like mine. Until now. A soft clatter drew their attention. Zane had already bounded up the gangway, the steward ushering him safely on board. Asher stepped beside Rachel, watching the boat gently rock. Why here? He asked. I needed somewhere quiet, she said. Not public, not watched, just us. They boarded together. Inside, the yacht's interior was all warm lighting and clean lines, furnished with soft leather and polished wood. A low table held a tray of cocoa and small pastries dusted with powdered sugar. Rachel disappeared briefly, returning barefoot, holding a thin folder. She set it on the table and opened it, sliding it toward Asher. He looked down. A glossy cover page read, Prescott Foundation Community Housing Initiative. Beneath it, architectural renderings and zoning notes. What is this? I started it 2 years ago. It was supposed to be temporary housing for single parents. But the board didn't see the return value, so it stalled. And now, I revived it, and I want you to run it. Asher stared at the plans. You want me to? What, be in charge? You have field experience most of my executives will never understand. You've lived it. You know where the cracks are. He ran a hand through his hair. I've never run anything but a household. Rachel stepped closer. That's not nothing. You've kept a child safe, stable, and kind through chaos. That's leadership. He met her gaze. Why me? She hesitated, then said, because I trust you. And I want to build something with someone who sees the world as it is, not just how it looks from a penthouse. Asher's voice was quieter now. You think we can fit into each other's lives? I think we already have, she said. But I also know it's not fair to ask you to stay in my world if I won't step into yours. He closed the folder gently. Then come see it. The next day, Rachel stood in the center of a community garden tucked between two crumbling apartment buildings. Children ran between the raised beds, laughing, while volunteers handed out tools and seed packets. Zane was helping a girl his age plant carrots, hands already covered in dirt. Asher stepped beside her, passing her a pair of gloves. You ever gardened before? I've flown over 1,000 of them, she said, but never touched one. He handed her a trowel. Then welcome to real life. They worked side by side, not talking much, just moving in rhythm, kneeling in soil, passing water jugs, wiping sweat from their brows. Rachel's coat lay forgotten on a bench, her silk blouse rolled at the sleeves. At one point, Zane ran over and wrapped his arms around her. You're really here? Rachel bent to hug him back. I am. Later that afternoon, they sat on the stoop of an old brownstone, watching the sun dip behind telephone lines. Rachel leaned her head on Asher's shoulder, her shoes kicked off beside her. You know, she said, voice low, I used to think love was a risk I couldn't afford. And now I think it's the only thing worth the risk. He turned his head toward her. I never expected any of this, not you, not this life. She lifted her eyes to his, but you stayed. Even when I didn't make it easy. I didn't know who you were, he said, but I knew how you made me feel. That was enough. Rachel took his hand. Then let me show you how I feel. The next evening, she stood at a podium in front of a room filled with reporters, board members, and community leaders. Asher stood in the wings with Zane, both in clean shirts and pressed pants. Rachel had insisted, and her assistant had made it happen. Rachel's voice echoed through the conference hall. For years, I believed success meant control, that emotions were liabilities, that love was a distraction. But a few weeks ago, a man I didn't know caught me when I fell. And then he didn't walk away. She paused, meeting Asher's eyes across the room. I'm not stepping down, she continued, but I am stepping forward, with new leadership on our housing initiative, with a vision that includes humanity. And with someone who reminded me that vulnerability is strength. Applause erupted, flashbulbs popped, and still her eyes never left his. Afterward, on the rooftop garden above the hall, she walked toward him slowly. The city glittered behind her, wind tugging at her loose curls. I meant every word, she said. He held out his hand. I know, Zane ran up between them, clutching a bouquet of tulips from the catering table. I got these for you, he said, holding them out to Rachel. Because that's what you do when you love somebody. Rachel knelt, tears rising in her eyes. Then I must be very loved, she looked up at Asher, and very lucky. Asher crouched beside her, wrapping one arm around Zane and the other around Rachel. You don't need luck anymore, he said. You've got us. The rooftop lights twinkled above them, the city roared beneath. But in that moment, there was only the three of them, solid, certain, and finally home. The morning light filtered through gauzy curtains as Rachel poured 2 mugs of coffee in the quiet kitchen of the brownstone. Asher had recently moved into small, sunlit, and full of life. Zane was still asleep upstairs, his dinosaur-themed nightlight casting tiny green stars across his ceiling. The scent of cinnamon rolls from the corner bakery lingered in the air, and the sound of birds outside their window mingled with the distant hum of the city. Asher stepped into the kitchen barefoot, his shirt rumpled, hair still damp from the shower. He leaned against the counter, watching Rachel slide his mug across to him. You're up early, he said, taking a sip. I couldn't sleep, she replied. He raised an eyebrow. Work? She shook her head. No, just thinking. He watched her quietly. About, she leaned against the opposite counter, her expression thoughtful. About permanence. I spent so long building things I could walk away from, offices, contracts, cities. but lately I find myself wanting roots." He set the mug down. "You want to stay here, in this neighborhood?" "I want to stay with you," she said. "Wherever that happens to be." They stood there for a beat, the weight of her words settling between them, warm and certain. Asher closed the distance and brushed a strand of hair from her cheek. "You already belong here, you always did." She rested her forehead against his chest. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if we hadn't met that night, if I hadn't collapsed?" He kissed the top of her head. "Then fate would have tried something else. Maybe I would have fixed your flat tire. Or we would have reached for the same apple at the store." Rachel laughed softly. "You think fate would have dragged me into your orbit no matter what? I think you were the only person who could have made me feel like the world wasn't something I had to survive anymore. Just something I got to experience with you." Later that day, they took Zane to the botanical gardens. Rachel held his hand as they wandered through the glass conservatory, stopping by the koi pond. Zane tossed in a few pieces of fish food and watched the orange and white shapes dart beneath the surface. Rachel crouched beside him. "What do you think about living near here, where we can come anytime you want?" Zane's eyes lit up. "Can we, for real?" She nodded. "For real?" Asher watched the two of them, his heart tightening in the best way possible. He hadn't known what a family could feel like until this. A week later, Rachel stepped away from the Prescott board for a 6-month sabbatical, the first real break she'd taken since taking over. In her absence, she appointed a female COO from the Housing Initiative team, someone who had come from the same neighborhoods they were trying to support. The board didn't like it. Rachel didn't care. She and Asher spent their evenings in the garden behind the brownstone, slowly transforming it from patchy weeds to something that pulsed with life. Zane painted rocks as markers for each herb. Rachel planted hydrangeas along the fence. Asher built a wooden bench from scratch, teaching Zane how to sand and stain the wood. One evening, as twilight fell and fireflies began to flicker in the air, Rachel reached into her coat pocket and handed Asher a small, square envelope. He opened it slowly, frowning. "What is this?" "It's not a contract," she said with a grin. "It's an invitation." Inside was a single card handwritten in her elegant script, "Dinner under the stars, just us, say yes." He looked up. "Tonight," she nodded, biting her lip. He laughed under his breath. "You're still full of surprises." That night, she led him to the rooftop of the brownstone, where she'd set up a small table beneath strings of glowing lights. A violinist played quietly in the corner. The food was simple roasted vegetables, fresh bread, wine, but everything tasted better with her beside him. After they ate, Rachel stood and walked to the edge of the rooftop, looking out over the city. Asher joined her, sliding his arms around her waist. "I used to think power was about being untouchable," she said, "but now I think the real power is being seen, and loved, and choosing it anyway." He turned her gently to face him, reaching into his jacket and pulling out a delicate ring, a twisted gold band with a single sapphire nestled in the middle. Rachel froze. "I didn't want to do this in front of a crowd," he said. "I didn't want photographers or headlines. Just you, just me, just now." She stared at him, breath caught. "I know we've both lived lives we never expected, and I know I can't promise everything will be easy, but I can promise I'll never let you fall alone again." Her voice broke. "Yes. Of course, yes." He slid the ring onto her finger and she kissed him, slow and certain, the city glowing behind them. They married 3 months later in the community garden they'd rebuilt together. Rachel wore a simple ivory dress, her hair down, a small bouquet of wildflowers in her hand. Asher wore a navy suit and held Zane's hand as they walked down the aisle together. The guests were neighbors, volunteers, and friends. No press, no board members, just the people who mattered. Rachel and Asher exchanged vows beneath the blooming trellis, surrounded by the scent of lavender and fresh soil. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, Zane threw handfuls of confetti into the air and shouted, "We did it." Afterward, they danced on the garden path beneath lanterns strung between trees. Rachel rested her head on Asher's shoulder as Zane twirled nearby with the other kids. "I never imagined being here," she whispered. "Neither did I," he said, "but I wouldn't change a thing." She smiled, eyes shining. "Neither would I." That night they returned to the brownstone, the three of them curled on the couch beneath a handmade quilt. Zane fell asleep first, nestled between them. Rachel looked at Asher over their son's head and whispered, "We're home." And they were. In every way that mattered, in laughter, in love, in a life they'd built together imperfect, beautiful, and entirely their own.